Hello, behavioral economics class. This is Kirsten Bohlen, connecting to share a reflection around the article Prospect Theory, Mitigation, and Adaptation to Climate Change. This article seeks to invite the reader to see how prospect theory can help create a more representative picture of how individuals make decisions in regard to climate action or non-climate action in regard to the response to climate change. Why do some people maybe reduce their waste, or they will, cut trees around their house to reduce fuel load for wildland fires? And why do others not, ascribe those behaviors, even though we're all in the same environment and seeing the change of climate? So, why are these happening? So the questions here on the slide: how can prospect theory inform climate change response measures? How do principles such as reference point, certainty effect, and loss aversion impact climate change mitigation? How does prospect theory complement or contrast with old school assumptions in economics like Homo economicus, the assumption that we all make decisions based on rationality? And right prospect theory looks to create a more representative, maybe more holistic and more realistic portrayal of how people are making decisions in their environment. And then the article also compares prospect theory with expected utility theory and explores how that may contrast or complement with that. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first chunk of information the author takes us through is the idea of reference points, right? That prospect theory principle of reference points and how that might impact climate change response mitigation or the lack of it. So they invite us to consider if an individual marks their reference point for climate change as the current day, that's going to impact how they choose to mitigate their risk or mitigate their losses if they view this current climate as the reference point in comparison to other people that might have a comparison point or reference point of the future, the climate in 50 years, 100 years. What is it going to look like then? And those people, the article suggests that those folks that have the reference point of the climate as the future have more aggressive, progressive, action-oriented climate responses and mitigation and adaptation than those that might view the climate as reference point as today, current day, or even they bring up the status quo, of what has been, if their reference point is what has been versus what is or what is, could be in the future, what's projected to be. So they invite us to think about that. How do individual reference points impact individual climate change response measures? So it invites us to explore that and takes us through some examples. The next big theme that the author invites us to think about is the difference in behavior around technical adaptation, which is this picture on the left, such as laying sandbags, to protect against flooding, or cutting trees around one's property if you live in an area where we do, where wildland fires are frequent, reducing wildland fuel load around your home. That the article explored this topic as technical adaptation and a different adaptation like financial adaptation, which would be getting insurance, right? Getting burn insurance, flood insurance with comprehensive coverage. And the article, from what it had listed, found that individuals were more motivated to make technical adaptations, like the cutting trees around one's home or laying sandbags for flooding and the trees for wildland fire, that they were more willing to do the technical adaptation than the financial adaptation of getting insurance plans against these natural disasters associated with climate change. So this is something interesting, and the article goes through different nuances of that. So they say that insurance for natural hazards that have a high impact but a low probability, those insurance buy-ins are relatively low. Whereas if it's a modest risk, more like medium risk, but it's a higher occurrence, people are willing to pay more for those financial adaptations or insurance plans, things of that nature. So yeah, it's like fascinating to see how these different aspects of prospect theory are helping us to understand how we might design and oh, not we, you know, we're not in charge of it, but you know, the folks that are in charge of creating climate change policy and, you know, making resources accessible and that sort of thing, right? Like taking these things in mind. So the next big chunk of information that the author takes us through is this idea of the certainty effect, which is exploring why do individuals make decisions that align with outcomes that they might prefer, but are less probable, right? And I put this photo there that I think became popular in like 2020 during the pandemic of you know, oh, we'll be fine, but the outcome is obviously not likely. So taking this back to the article, in general, they cover different strategies that people will use to you know, navigate this certainty effect and the odd behaviors that people will take on, even in the face of, you know, a less probable reality. They'll still move forward with behaviors that align with an outcome they would like to see, which is, you know, interesting. So definitely something we can learn from prospect theory to help inform a climate change mitigation response. The next theme I'm going to take us through, or not, you know, that the article takes us through, is just challenges to consider. So the author points out the importance of reference points in regard to anticipating individual behavior for climate change mitigation and adaptation, because depending on how the individual marks their reference point as, you know, climate change currently, climate change in the past, or climate change in 50 years will depend on their behavior and how that happens. So the author just candidly brings up, hey, you know, that's a challenge in regard to empirical evidence for applying prospect theory to climate mitigation strategies, is this idea that depending on someone's reference point, that will drastically change how they're showing up and engaging with mitigation and adaptation strategies. So I appreciate the author invited us to consider that. So I will conclude the video with that. It's a wonderful article if you're interested in climate change, or, you know, how prospect theory can impact decisions in regard to policy and risk and loss aversion. Gosh, great article to read. Thank you, folks. Bye.